Today we're going to break down if State Farm is a good insurance company going forward from 2026 and beyond. And we're going to use some of the information, mainly employee opinions. We're going to go through some customer complaints, and then we're actually going to use some of their financial data to explain whether they are able to pay your claim if you have a claim. There's some pretty interesting pieces there that you're going to want to wait for in the video to watch. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly whether State Farm is a great fit for you specifically, or whether you should just avoid them altogether. So who is State Farm? State Farm is one of the largest insurance companies for personal lines. That's typically your home, your auto, an umbrella, motorcycle, boats, all of those personal lines type of insurance. They essentially dominate the auto insurance industry in most of the states. Initially, they were just price focused, and they'd come into an area, give you the lowest price, and then over time, the next several years, the price would start to creep up and they'd still own that market share. They do it a little bit differently now. It's mainly home, renters, and umbrella that we're looking at, but the bigger piece that you have to think of is compared to other companies, State Farm is what's called a captive agency model or agent model. And essentially what that means is State Farm, even though they sell different product lines, you can only shop with that one company. So they're not like what's called an independent agent where they can shop multiple lines such as Allstate, Nationwide, Progressive, Geico, and all of the local companies as well, just to compare all the rates with different ones. So State Farm specifically is designed only for their products. Now that alone isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing, because if they're competitive in an area, then they're going to have some pretty good rates. In most cases, the bigger piece that you're going to see is that when prices change, that model tends to tighten up. So the business that State Farm would want to take in is going to look a little bit differently. What that model means is that they're trying to get you to love the agent. So if you love the agent, you're not necessarily going to leave if the prices go up. If you're in a different scenario where an independent agent and you love that agent, they give you the good advice, they've got decent rates or good rates, it's not always the cheapest. But then if prices do go up, your independent agent is going to check other options. So yeah, we're with Nationwide today, maybe we're with Liberty Mutual in a couple years, and maybe it ends up being Progressive here for the auto and a different company for your home. So they can mix those pieces. Where that State Farm product, they just have to continuously stay competitive, which means they cannot have too many losses, otherwise the rates will have to come back up to fight for the continuous growth of the company. So the real question there is not whether State Farm is big, they're a large company either way, it's whether they're consistent enough for you to stay with. And that's where the stability of the company is rated against. There's companies called AM Best, and they rate the stability, the financial of each insurance company, and go over whether they're going to be able to pay claims and help you if there is a major claim. In this case, State Farm is an A+ rated company, which is a good sign. However, they've been trending downwards. They were an A++ company, which was even better. But unfortunately, because of a lot of the losses they've had, which we'll talk here in just a moment about, they've actually lost some of their AM Best ratings over the last several years. That's something you're not necessarily going to hear in the commercials. No one's going to talk bad about their own company. But in tied with this, State Farm has for multiple years shown several underwriting losses. Wait a minute, what's that mean? In plain English, if they take in $1, they're paying out more than $1 in claims. So every $1,000 that you pay them, they're actually paying $1,000 more plus out of pocket to pay for claims of other people that are being insured. Again, that also doesn't mean that they're going broke. They have a ton of reserves. State Farm is one of the largest insurance companies, which means they have a lot of savings. The government does force them to have a certain percentage to be able to pay those claims. And that's where that rating of that AM Best comes into play. Keep in mind, just because they have a lot of reserves, just because they have a lot of income, just because of all of these pieces, it doesn't mean that they're always going to necessarily pay a claim. Because the money's there, they have to still be tight with it and make sure that they're not overpaying for claims. And here's where State Farm starts to lose a lot of their reputation. Yes, the common is true where if you have a lot of claims, they're going to absorb it by slowly increasing the rates in different areas, and actually largely increasing the rates in different areas. That's one of the bad raps that you get with a lot of these insurance companies. When they do have a ton of losses, it's easy to tell. Your rate goes up 15%, 20%, 30%, and it's because of the losses are too large for them to sustain to make a profit at the back end and then invest that money to create more profit is what their initial design is. So let's dive into some of the complaints. There's a company called the NAIC Complaint Index, and what that is, it's essentially a score that you as a consumer overall across the United States and different states, all of these pieces are giving a rating for these companies. State Farm has been continuously good good for the home and auto, but in general, if you take all of their personal lines products, they're not doing so good when it comes to complaints. According to the last research that I found, it's averaging about 1.47, which is about 47 points or percent more than I would have expected them to be. The way that this is rated is essentially on a scale of 1. And that scale of 1, in my opinion, I just say that 1 equals 100%. So anytime you're lower than that's good, that's less complaints. People are not on average complaining. Their overall score, according to the research I've seen, is 1.47. So what does that mean to you as a consumer when I'm purchasing it? What's that 1.47 actually do? In this case, what you're going to see is the complaints that State Farm has been having is not that they're not paying claims. They are paying your typical glass claim. They're paying the typical, my car was stolen, or it got chipped by a rock, I hit somebody. The commonality, the essentially black and white, you can clearly see that was a claim that was listed on my policy. The complaints that State Farm is showing is that their time frame is taking a lot longer. And a lot of people are starting to sue the company because they're saying you're purposely dragging out my claim so that you can make the profit on the investments, and you're trying to essentially squeeze every dollar. Every day is hundreds of thousands of dollars for this company to make more money. And in this case, there's a lot of complaints because of the length of the claims being done. The other frustrations is with adjusters' communications. Now, I'll be honest with you, that's probably a complaint with most companies, but with State Farm, it showed up more often than a typical insurance company would be expected to. In this case, the actual communication, is my claim being done, falls in line with the delay of claims. So in these cases, and it's taking too long to fix the car or fix the home. The other frustration customers are showing is that whenever there's a total loss, in most of these cases, it's the wording of the policy. Is this covered? Is this not covered? So we said black and white, right? They're good at that. But there's the gray area, whether we don't really specifically state if this is being covered. And State Farm has been caught in several videos not covering claims that you and I would typically just expect it to be covered. Because it isn't listed properly or it's confusing in the paperwork, yes, the lawyer's probably going to win the battle at the end of the day, but do you want to take 6 months and process the claim? Your house is still in shambles, your car's in pieces, you ran out of your rental car coverage, and at the end of that process, it's the frustration that's causing those issues in the long run. So that number one complaint that I've seen in the past is not so much that the claims are being denied, it's more that the expectation isn't matching what the policy language is saying. The sad part is this is where that agent has the time to shine. This is where you actually need your insurance company. And that's where the make or break, in my opinion, is where you realize I either bought the cheapest thing possible and I regret that, or I got a really good deal and they covered me correctly. It's a big difference whether those claims are being drawn out, whether the agent is behind you and helping process and push everything through versus an agent or agency that is just kind of, yeah, figure it out yourself. Too bad, so sad, lost another customer. Okay, let's talk about pricing because that is a big factor. And one of the things that I've noticed with State Farm is they used to, if you were to go to their website several months ago or several years ago, they talked a lot about the type of coverages you should carry. And one of the things that I've noticed is they've slowly been transitioning to what the commonality of the industry is, which is buy the cheapest thing possible and buy the best deal you can find. Essentially, you need to know the coverages you need to carry first. And that's what I liked about their model was it was mostly focused on coverage. You go to their website today, it's about saving money. It's about getting the best deal for the coverage. It's starting to shift away from you should be insured properly and let's have that conversation, and more into the conversation of how do I just get the cheapest deal. I personally have seen it when we shop other companies and we get State Farm agents, which we have friends that are State Farm agents, and they shop it around, and sometimes there's some agents you never heard of and they go through and they just gut the policy that the customer has. Yeah, of course they're going to be cheaper. That's just a common thing. Again, that's not every agent. It depends on the agent that you're working with. That's why it's important to trust the agent first before you even dive into what coverages and pricing you should be paying for those coverages. State Farm is constantly not the cheapest price. You're not going to notice that from them because they focus a lot on the branding more than they do the pricing. At least they used to, and it's starting to pivot a little bit. So some of the ways that you can tell if you're a good fit for them as a customer is if you have a clean driving record, if you have multiple policies, if you're looking for a home, auto, an umbrella, you've got a boat on the side of the house, all of those pieces are typically good fits. Drivers that are willing to give up some data, which is common, and use what's called a telematics. That's their drive safe and save. We've got a video that we're recreating on this channel, which actually is a huge video on this channel that goes over the drive safe and save and tells you what data you're giving up and whether it's a good fit. I'll link that at the end if you guys are interested in more of that video. State Farm tends to be poorly priced for people that have multiple tickets. Oddly enough, they're actually good priced when you're a young driver. So if you're a young driver under 25, they typically are pretty decently priced unless you have multiple tickets and high-risk zip codes. Because of a lot of the issues you've seen in other states like California, you've noticed that their prices have gone completely haywire. On top of it, they also aren't even writing certain types of business in certain areas. The other piece that you've noticed that some states and sometimes when everything tightens up and those prices are starting to raise and they're revamping the product, they'll notice that they put a delay on getting a policy. That's essentially their way of saying, we're not ready for new customers. And if you have to wait 8 days to purchase a policy from them, then it typically is in an area most likely that it's just not going to be competitive either way. Or they're ultra competitive and they're going to raise the rates anyways. So you sneak in for that deal, but just expect it to go up. Typical states like Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, they're very competitive with. However, you've got to compare that to what their competition is. And when you compare them to a Safeco or Liberty Mutual or a Nationwide, that competitiveness, although is really good in a lot of those areas, may not be as good compared to their competitors. Don't get me wrong, they have to be competitive somewhere, otherwise they're not going to win. It's not that State Farm is necessarily a bad company, it's when you look at the overall model and the processing and their background and what's been changing since 2026 and moving forward, just some of those pieces just don't align up. There's a couple puzzle pieces missing. And for the person that is looking for a solid, good company, it's a good option. For others that want to compare and check some of those other options, it may not be the best fit when you actually line it up coverage to coverage against some of their direct competitors. Their most popular discount is going to be what we mentioned as that drive safe and save. That can make a pretty big impact if you're willing to have them essentially not necessarily give you a discount. It's one of those things, if you already drive safely, you just have to prove that you're a good driver. And what that does is that gets you a cheaper rate going forward. Once you've shown that you're able to become a good driver, they initially give you the discount that you would want to have in the beginning. If you're not touching your phone while driving, if you're not braking hard, if you're driving during normal times of the day, you're probably a good fit. It might be worth checking out. Again, like I said, I'll link the video at the end that goes more in depth on the exact pieces of that drive safe and save. Now, one of the bigger things that I personally believe makes a company strong is the employees. And that's where you can really tell if a company is going to be a good fit for you or not. Pricing matters. Claims matter a lot, especially when you have them, not so much until you have them. If you never have one, you're great. You paid a low price, you're good. You got out the door and you're happy. If you start having claims and questions and service and how do I change red car to blue car, or should I file this claim, all of those pieces, the actual employees that you're going to deal with are going to make the biggest impact. Now, I actually go to Glassdoor and use their data to show, do the employees believe in the founder? Do they believe in the direction of the company? And what are their overall opinions? This is where State Farm actually does fairly well. They have a strong belief in the stability. They are a mission-driven culture, is what a lot of people have said, and they have pride in helping others. Although they do consistently mention that there is frustration with the leadership decisions. There's a lot of operational pressure in claims and service roles, which is what we're starting to see with all of the retention and all of the issues that they've had, like we mentioned. Their overall rating against complaints is not so great, and that's because of the pressure that they have in the claims department and the service roles. So honestly, I think they're probably just overwhelmed with the number of claims that they've had lately. versus the number of employees that they have. So it's almost, hey, if you're gonna have to make me work mandatory overtime and I gotta do all these things and I'm trying to feed my kids and spend time with them, and now I'm doing all these claims and they're being denied and they're being extended and all those things, that's just gonna create a situation where you're constantly getting yelled at. And if a customer's frustrated, they're going to express that opinion to you, and it's essentially not the best working environment. So why does this matter to you? It's like we said, it's the amount of claims, the slower service, they're tightening up the claims handling, and the flexibility that you're going to see at a renewal. So you don't want to feel like you're the third wheel in the company that you're paying for a service. At the end of the day, is State Farm a good insurance company to go with? If you want a local agent, have a relationship, if you have a clean driving record and you're looking to bundle home and auto, and you happen to be in a zip code or a location that is a good fit, yes, State Farm is going to be a good company for you. If you strongly want to compare your options, if you've had any tickets, if you live in what's called a little bit of a riskier area, so you're not directly in the suburbs, and you want to work with an independent agent to shop, to check the other prices, then no, State Farm isn't going to be a fit for you. For that type of person, you're going to be looking at some of those independent agents, since you're going to build trust with somebody that you can have shop with those different options. If you are shopping for new home and auto insurance, I'll put a link in the description below where you can work with one of those independent agents, the direct competitors to State Farm. So if you've got that option, you're like, hey, should I actually go with this quote? Is State Farm giving me my best interest? And I want to compare that to the Nationwides and the Liberty Mutuals and the Geicos and the Progressives and all those guys. Then that link in the description is below where you can check those options and find an agent that can give you some opinions or some better pricing for a similar company. If you're thinking State Farm is the best fit for you, let me know in the comments below. But your next option is to understand that drive safe and safe, because that's going to be your biggest savings. This video here is going to go further in depth. If you're looking for general discounts that you want to save and you're thinking, okay, what discounts can I apply for? Here's a great discount video here that's going to go further in depth as well. I'm Mark with Think Insurance. I'll see you in the next one.